Good morning, and thank you for attending this week's webinar with CoreCommerce. This is Chris Graffinino, the Chief Operating Officer of CoreCommerce, and I will be doing a webinar today about options and variants and personalization. So if you're on this webinar and you're an existing customer, this is probably something you've had a little experience dealing with one way or the other. And, we get enough questions from existing customers and new customers, as a matter of fact, that I felt it would be good to do a webinar just to explain from my point of view, having been with the company for as long as I have, over 15 years now, actually more like 17 years. I lose track of time. I thought it would be a good idea to kind of just go over what they are, what the differences are, uh, some example cases of when you could use one type over the other, and then I'll talk a little bit about importing those options as well. So I'll give everyone a couple more minutes here to join, and then I'll get started. Thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Looks like there's a good amount of people in here, and some other people may trickle in as we get going, but that's okay. So I will get started on this webinar, and we'll get going here. So again, my name's Chris. We do webinars here for Core Commerce every week going forward. This is the fourth one now, and we'll be doing these every single week. So looking forward to continuing to do these for everybody who joins. Uh, Hello to everybody who's in here now. So just to start fresh from the top, today's webinar is going to be about options. I'm going to talk a little bit about what they are, what the differences are, uh, why you would use one versus the other, and then I'll talk a little bit about importing them and kind of the strategies that I've used over the years when it comes to importing things. So with that said, I'm going to get started with it webinar. And if for some reason you have to leave early and you end up needing a recording of this webinar, feel free to just send me an email and let me know. And I am more than happy to send the webinar to you. So just I see a couple people trickling in here at the last minute. So thank everyone for joining. Again, this webinar is going to be about options, and I'm going to now share my screen. And everyone should be able to see my screen at this point. There we go. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started with this webinar here, and I'll show you a few things here at the end. And any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, or and we'll go through questions in that fashion. So with that, I'll get started. So today's webinar, as you all know, is going to be about options and variants, and it's kind of understanding what they are, how they're used in core commerce, and things along those lines. So I'll get started here. So moving on to my next slide. So the first question is, what is an option? What is a variant? And most of the people that I see on this webinar right now are familiar with what they are, and you probably already use them. So options are just actual choices, optional, quote unquote, choices or questions that you need to ask on a product in order for that person to tell you exactly what they want. So whether it's a size on a t-shirt or a color on a pillowcase, um, you can add these options in many different ways in order to make a product configurable or make sure a customer orders the exact right version of an item that they need from you. And it can be done in multiple ways, depending on how you need to do it. And so um, the two main types of how we handle options in CoreCommerce are going to be what we refer to as personalizations versus option sets. And personalizations is defined as an independent question that you would need to ask in order for an item to be added to cart. For example, if you sell a coffee mug and you need to monogram someone's name on it and you need them to tell you the spelling of the name, right? You would ask them one independent question that is not dependent on anything else you do on that product in order for you to answer that question. You would just simply type in the person's name, and then when you add to cart, that person's name is then sent to you, the administrator. You know what to do with that mug. So far, everything's good to go. You get it. So option sets, on the other hand, I've seen them used in the same way, but they offer a little bit more advanced flexibility for when that is needed. So option sets are really designed for if you have products that have a lot of different choices that need to be made, and not all choices may be applicable. That's when option sets really can come in handy. So um, for example, if you have a t-shirt and it comes in 20 different colors and 10 sizes, but not every size comes in every color, option sets is a way for you to set it up to where someone can't accidentally buy a product from you that in a configuration that doesn't exist, if that makes sense. So, if you have a t-shirt that does come in 20 colors and 10 sizes, but every single option is always available 100% of the time, and that will never change, you can certainly still set those up as two different personalizations because it won't matter. But when you need the dependency and you need certain things to be shown and hidden based on what the customer is picking, that's when option sets can come in very handy to help you make sure that people are not buying what you don't have, if that makes sense. So moving on to editing, adding options, importing options. The best way to import a lot of options into CoreCommerce is to do it through a CSV upload. And there's a sample file you can download that gives you an idea of what that file looks like. To me, the best way to see how to import options is to go through a product and add one directly in the admin, and then run the product option export or the personalization export, depending on which one you want to do. And then viewing the actual file that it exported, because that is the import template. Then you can see, based on the names that you gave everything, you can see exactly where it put what data and what format it's expecting you to re-import it back in as, and so far and so forth. And that's how I do it all the time when I'm helping with updating options or adding new options for customers, or when they ask me how I would do it. That's always the way I recommend. So as far as putting a personalization in the admin, if you've never done this before, you'll notice when you add a product or edit a product, at the top, there's general, there's photos, and then there's a section called variants. And when you click on it, you come to a screen like this where you can add different personalizations. For example, in this screenshot, you see I added a personalization called size, and I gave it 3 choices: small, medium, and large. In this case, I just made it a drop-down menu, and you can pick between small, medium, and large, and that's it. That's all it really does, right? And there's other options you can set. If the answer has its own price that gets added on, does it have its own SKU? There's all kind of other little pieces you could add to it, but that's essentially the gist of adding a personalization. Option sets, and I did this in the same product so that you could kind of see the differences. When I want to do options, I might create, the assumption is you're going to have multiple drop downs of stuff to pick from, whether it's a size and a color. In this case, I'd use the word material just to make it a different word. So, if you have a product, let's say a t-shirt, you need in that I need to pick which material does it come in, cotton, polyester, or whatever, and then what color does it need to be in. That's kind of the example I was going through here. And then so once you've created the different drop downs and the choices in those drop downs, which is what you see on the left where it says options and then material and then color, I created each drop down and what choices come in those drop downs. Once you've done that, then you click on where it says option sets on the left, and now you see a screen like what's in this screenshot, where what CoreCommerce does is it will aggregate all of the possible combinations of those two drop downs. In this case, because I have two drop downs, each with two choices, there's four possible combinations of choices that could be selected from those two drop downs. And that's what this screen does for you. It aggregates all those combinations together. So that way, if there are any specific combinations that do not exist, that you do not sell, you can enable the ones that do and disable the ones that do not. So in this example you're seeing on the screen, I'm basically telling the system that polyester and green does not exist. I don't sell that combination. So in other words, I'm telling CoreCommerce, do not allow a customer to be able to select polyester and then green. So if they, on the front end, the way this would work is I would see two drop-down menus, one for choose your material and one for choose your color. Now, if I pick cotton, it's going to end up showing me a color drop-down with red and green in it because they're both eligible. But if I switch to polyester, the second drop-down will automatically update itself and only show me red because that's the only eligible option available. And so again, the point is it's preventing me from accidentally selecting polyester and green, so I don't pick something that's not available for sale and then have to deal with a refund and all that kind of stuff. So that's where option sets comes in handy, is when that kind of scenario comes in. If that scenario does not exist in your business, everything is always eligible, then option sets probably is a little overkill for what you would need. And personalization should do the trick 99.9% of the time. And then you can see here just a separate screenshot of the same thing. And so once you've added a test option, like I just did on that example, I could come to on the left-hand side, you would see inventory and then export products. And then you would either pick the export all product personalizations or you'd pick export option sets. And you'd see a screen like this that would let you then export, right? So what would happen is once that file got exported, here's a couple of screenshots of what's in the actual CSV file. And I also have the actual CSV file itself that I'll show you in just a minute. So the first screenshot at the top is what would happen when you export personalizations. So you're going to get the ID of the product itself, the SKU of the item, if there is one, the name of the item, the vendor, and this fifth column is the one that's really the most important. So when you're updating an existing personalization, you'll see this column in here called question ID and answer ID. So that column tells CoreCommerce which exact question and answer to update. So if we want to update existing personalizations in the CoreCommerce platform, we want that column to be there. So once you export, you want to make sure that column is there. If it is there, it will update question ID, for example, question ID 597 and answer ID 5374, which in this case is the word size and the word small tied to that cinnamon candle product. If you remove that column and just leave the question and the answer, CoreCommerce takes that to mean that you want to add a new personalization to that product that does not currently exist. And it will add a new question called size and an answer called small because it assumes you're telling it doesn't exist in the first place. So that's the main difference between adding personalizations with an import and updating personalizations with an import, is that one column that tells it, does it exist or does it not exist? Now in the second screenshot you see here, and I have some more detailed screenshots here in just a moment. The second screenshot is for when you deal with option sets, and that's not the whole file. That's just a very brief little snippet of what some of the columns are. So it's similar file, but it has other fields in it related to how this would work. And in my next slide here, I talk more about the question ID and the answer ID that I just went through, as well as in the product option file, the option group ID and the option ID. It's the same concept. So when you're importing option sets, if you want to update existing option sets, the option group ID and the option ID, which will be provided to you in the file that exports out, will still need to be in there so that CoreCommerce knows exactly which record in the database you want it to update. If you want to add new option sets that are similar, what I've done in the past is you just take the option group ID and option ID values out, and there are multiple versions of that column in this spreadsheet, which I'll show you in just a moment, based on a few different parameters. And let's see, it looks like I have does somebody have a question? I'm trying to say, it looks like there's something was popping up here. Oh, I'll keep going. So you'll be able to add or remove those columns accordingly to help you with importing versus updating values that already exist. And so I have my conclusion there, but I want to show you now is these actual files. These are the files from the screenshot that I just showed you, but these are the real files. So let's say, for example, I just want to take these 3 personalization options to small, medium, and large, and I just want to change large to the word extra large. I literally could just do this. And then save this file as a CSV file, re-upload it, and it would do exactly what I expected it to do. And for this line, it would go find question ID 597, which is the dropdown for size. And then it would find answer ID 5376, which was this, and it will update the name of that to X large. Done. But let's say now I need to, I want to add a whole nother dropdown to this, or add an extra answer to this dropdown that doesn't exist. I mean, obviously I could go into this one product and manually add another section, right? But one thing I could do is I could copy this into here, and this is where it would change. So one thing is this product ID is going to tell it what exact product in the database to update. So you don't want to get rid of that when you're updating. Now, what I would do in this case is there's 2 options here. If I wanted to add a whole nother dropdown, let's say for color, then this column would be blank the whole time. Or in some cases, if everything in this document I was adding from scratch, none of it existed, I would just remove this whole column altogether so it wouldn't do anything that I didn't want it to do. But if you did this, then it would know that it needed to add a new answer that doesn't exist to this. And that's how I would do something like that. But I've also seen where you want to basically, I want to add a whole nother drop down to cinnamon candle. And one way you can do that in the file is basically copy all this, paste it again, except now make all of these blank. And then I would say color. And this is one way to do it, right? You don't have to necessarily do it this way, but it comes in handy to make it faster if you know what you need to do here. But you could also go into the product and add, this color option manually as well. And like this, and then make sure that pipe stays in there, because that pipe differentiates between what's the question and what's the answer to the question. So I would just do stuff like this. And then I could say, I keep getting rid of the pipe when I don't want to. There you go. Something like that, right? And because this is blank, that tells CoreCommerce that I need to create something. And so it will create a new dropdown called color and create these 4 answers within that dropdown called color. Now you would come back through and decide whether all these other options needed to be on. Most of the time, I would, a lot of this stuff would just be set to what it is by default. The only thing you would ever really need to change is like the price. If the actual price of this particular answer needed to have a certain value, if you did your pricing that way, if the option answer itself has its own SKU, like like something like that, maybe, I don't know, or CG, I don't know. And then, you can have that SKU be included in the order if you need it to be, if you set your stuff up that way. And of course, there's other things in here about each answer can have its own swatch image on the screen if you need to do, if it's colors, swatches come in really handy for stuff like that. And then basically, once I had this file the way I wanted it, I would just save it as a CSV file, re-upload it to CoreCommerce. CoreCommerce would already know what all these column headers mean because it's the same ones it exported. And then you can import the file and it should do what you want. Now with option sets, it's similar, but not exactly the same thing. With option sets, it's going to go through and, each option set, for example, is represented all on one row. So if I go through here, there's images I could upload related to each option set, but you'll see what I'm talking about here as we get into the meat of this. So once I get into where the actual option itself is defined, this is where, you see this option group ID. And when I'm updating, this field is necessary so it knows I need to go find option group ID 1, which in this case translates to an option dropdown called material. But this is what really tells the database exactly which record to update. So if I were adding new option sets that didn't exist, I would take out all these option group IDs and all these option IDs for each one of these to make sure that it was going to do what I wanted. So for example, the option group ID, it means the main dropdown itself, material. As I keep going, you'll notice now I have option ID, and option ID is the word cotton, and cotton is one of the choices in the material dropdown, which is what it's doing there. And I could give it a sort. I could give it images if I wanted. If I keep going, you'll see option group ID 2. So now we're talking about the second drop-down menu for color. And then the choice of red for that particular drop-down there. And then, of course, that particular option could have its own image as well if you wanted. Most people don't even use that, but that's essentially what happens. So then, just to continue to read through this file to understand how this file is organized and what it's showing you. Let me see if let me do this. Will it? Hoping to use my keyboard. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. So on the second item, it's basically saying this is the second combination option set related to this item, right? So on this combination, I'm going to have material drop down again. I'm going to have a cotton drop down again, and cotton is the choice under material, right? But on this one, you'll notice that the one color it's talking about is green, not red. And that's because it's the second combination that could have existed. Now, when we get to the third item on this list, it's the same product still. Now, the third combination, if you remember, we told it to not allow polyester and green in that screenshot we went over. So on this third line, you'll notice it says materials, polyester, and then color is red. But you'll notice there is no color is green in here because since we turned it off, it didn't save it. It didn't save it as an actual combination that you could use, which is why it didn't export it, because it doesn't want you to accidentally import it back in and all of a sudden make it available when you didn't mean to. So because it was disabled already in the CoreCommerce admin, it did not export it out to the file here. So if you ever wanted to turn it on, you could go into the product manually and turn it on, or I could show you other ways that we could help you do stuff like that. But it's not going to export it out to the file if it's already disabled. Now, what you could do also is potentially just turn it. Turning it off is going to be the best way to do it, to be honest. So with that said, that is, you take this file and then you would import it back in, and then it would update the products accordingly. So for example, if I wanted to just take this file and re-import it, we could see what it would do. And so it's, the whole point of this is this stuff can get a little tricky. And that's why I wanted to do this webinar, just to not only explain the difference between the two, which I think most people that are listening right now probably to a point understood the difference and why you would use one over the other. But the bigger point was to just walk through what these files mean and what you're looking at. Because sometimes, and even when I come back and look at these, they get pretty daunting, especially if you have, let's say you have 500 items, and then each item has, multiple option sets, and now you have a file that has 13,000 records in it, right? Well, that's a lot of stuff to go through manually. So knowing exactly how it works can help make it a little bit easier to edit it, as far as, and I've used different tricks in, whether it's Microsoft Excel or whatever, to mass update data in the Excel file, um, to change things. So if I know, anywhere, if let's say I had 3,000 instances of a dropdown called size, and I needed to change it to be called material, well, then I could export this file, do a mass find and replace on the word size for the word material, and then re-upload it, and it updated all of them to say material in the database of your store. So there's things like that you can do, and there's more intricate things I can do as well with formulas in Excel, and maybe that'll be another webinar at some point too, as far as, if you guys think that would be a webinar that would help, then let me know for sure, as far as just what kind of other Excel tips and tricks could we do as far as manipulating data and import files and things like that. And if you have any specific examples that you guys have run into related to that, please let me know what those are, and I'm happy to go over them with you, either personally, or we can do it right now on this call if we need to. But in any event, that kind of concludes where I wanted to go with this. So just, as a reminder here, let me get my webinar sharing screen here. So just my conclusion tab here is, importing tools are great, and not just for adding the new data, but they're also very good for updating the data, especially if you have a lot of data to update. And with a few simple tweaks to the export file, as I went over, you can instantly mass copy records, or you can update records a lot quicker than you would be doing it if it was just one-off editing products manually in the admin. And option sets, I would say, definitely for the more advanced setup, and you really only need to use them when there are certain combinations of options that are not allowed. If that's never going to be the case, then I would always recommend that you use personalizations, since they're easier to set up and configure. You can do it quicker, and it will always offer every choice to the customer. So it can be pretty daunting, but it's, with our help, hopefully this makes it less daunting, and it is not as bad as it does seems, but I understand how it can certainly be intimidating if you're looking at the file and not quite sure what to do with it. So with that said, I appreciate everyone's time. If there's any questions at all about this, please throw a question into the Q&A, and I'm happy to read it here and answer it as best I can. And if you ever have anything that you'd like to talk about outside of this, let me know as well. Let's see. So I see Mike, I see one question from Michael who in the chat. I'm just now seeing it, Mike, so thanks for that. Michael's question is, when you're deleting a personalization, what do you do to column 5? So with the way the import file works, it's not going to delete personal that are in the system already. So there's not a way to tell it to delete the item. That's actually a good suggestion. I'm writing that down here on the side as something we can do. Now, the reason for that is because it'd be very easy to accidentally upload a file that only has a few records in it, and the system think you want to delete every record that's not in the file, and all of a sudden you bombed 98% of all your options, right? So that's a big part of why we didn't do it, but we can, what might be a decent idea is to add a column into the import file, like in here. Let me go back to the personalization import, Mike, that you were talking about. So one potential solution that is we could add another column into this import that says delete. And if delete equals Y, that would tell the system that you actually want to delete that record from the database. And that would be a way around it. That's not something it does today, but it's something I'll think about having our guys put in with that problem. Yep. So Mike said I had to go in and manually edit products one by one to delete certain things. So Mike, that's what I said. That's actually a good suggestion, a very good suggestion. And if we add a column into that file where you can denote whether you want the record deleted, then that would solve your problem. You would be able to just upload a file and tell it which ones to delete, and it would delete them for you. So I'm writing that down. I'm actually just going to have a programmer work on that here in the next week or two. That's a great suggestion. Appreciate that very much. Did anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A, wherever you see a place to type. I'm checking both, so just let me know what other questions you might have. Okay, and I didn't see any other questions come in, so no worries. If you think of a question after the fact, please feel free to send me an email directly at Chris, K-R-I-S, at CoreCommerce.com. I'm happy to answer it. And I will be editing and getting the video of this webinar prepared within the next 24 to 48 hours. And so if anybody wants a recording of this webinar, it will go up on our YouTube channel once it's ready. And I'm happy to send that link to anybody who needs it. So feel free to ask for it if you'd like it, and or just check out our YouTube channel as well, and we'll go from there. But if no one has any other questions, I'll let everyone go today. I appreciate it. And as always, feel free to email me anytime with any new ideas as far as other webinars you might do. And we'll, I'm happy to hear any ideas on that. And we'll be announcing our next webinar here on Thursday, and look forward to seeing everyone next week for the next webinar. And with that, I appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you so much. Again, any questions, feel free to email me. Let me know what I can do to help you. And we look forward to continuing to do these, and I hope these are informative and they're helping you out. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and look forward to talking to you again soon.